Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to episode 50 of Ruddle Me This. I am, as always, your host, the high-calorie man, Taylor Ruddle. Absolutely mad to think that we are 50 episodes into this little podcast that I started out, done from literally my sofa in the living room with some pretty basic equipment and a whole pile of fantastic and willing guests just willing to have a chat about everything. It's crazy to think that we've got a pretty decent little listener base that have stuck with me through the early onset weirdness. Started out the show talking about posters, moved on to the show talking about what came after the posters. It was like a piece of media or something like that helped shape the performer. And then we kind of figured out that the secret ingredient to the podcast was to just get somebody to talk about something they're really passionate about for about 40 minutes. So keeping in with that trend of trying new things with this podcast, episode 50, we are going to be doing another little experiment. This is an idea that you've probably heard me talk about a little bit leading up to this. If you're a comedian or just a person in my life, you've probably heard me talking about it. So today is going to be the debut episode of a new segment that I'm calling 10 Tiny Joys. And my first guest for 10 Tiny Joys is actually a comic that I've been a fan of for a long time. It is Dan Bublitz Jr. He is a stand-up comedian based over in Denver in the United States. We get into that a little bit in the podcast. I've been following Dan's work for many years now, ever since I discovered a couple of articles that he had written. One of them was about how to book a comedy show and kind of run it yourself. And then the other one was about how to create a professional electronic press kit, or EPK. So I'm absolutely stoked to have Dan with us on the podcast today. I have been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks now. We explained the format of the show a couple of minutes into the interview, so I won't chat to you anymore. Let's just get right on with the interview, roll the opening music, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to 10 Tiny Joys. I'm your host, Taylor Ruddle, and this is the show where we celebrate the mundane moments in life that brighten up your day. There's a lot of hardships in the world, so in 10 Tiny Joys, we take the time to cherish those little moments that make life worth living. So sit back, relax, and let's begin 10 Tiny Joys. Hello, Dan, and welcome to 10 Tiny Joys.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. You're actually you're the first dog being sent into space in the Sputnik.
Oh no, I'm the guinea pig.
Yeah, we're going to be trialing it up. But I mean, pretty much everyone I've run this idea by have loved it, and I've seen some people's lists who are going to be joining the show in the future, and it's so funny because I see every item on the list and I go, yeah, same. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I really had to think about it because I was like, am I going to screw this up?
No,
it's like
everybody's
what are teeny
about.
Tiny joys? Are my joys teeny enough?
Well, that's the thing.
Are they tiny enough?
People are worried that they're not exciting, but I think it's the mundane things that are what we want to get into the guts of. So you would have heard the intro of the listener listening to this, 10 Tiny Joys. We're just going to be talking about 10 little mundane objects throughout my guests' week or their month that bring them joy. So it's less holding my newborn son for the first time and more opening a cold soda on a hot day or something like that. So Dan's list is fantastic. Before we get started, anything you'd like to say to the audience or anything?
I mean, I hope you enjoy my list. No, I mean, yeah, just follow me on social media, Debub Comedy, everywhere. Do the shameless plug. I don't know.
Absolutely. We'll chuck all of that in the description below. So we'll get straight into your list. Your first item is gentle puppy kisses.
That's right. I love my dogs. I have two small dogs, and their particular breed, they are lickers, but they're very gentle. Like when they're giving their little kisses, they're very,
what sort of dogs are they?
Excuse me. I have two Chorkies, so they're Yorkie and Chihuahua. And
yes.
Yeah, and they're brothers, but they're out of two different litters with the same parents. One looks more like a Yorkie. The other one looks like a Chihuahua.
Oh, that's cool. So you've got the kind of duality there.
Yep. And they're just the sweetest.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are you someone that minds them if they like lick your face and your mouth and stuff like that?
Nope, not at all. I'm a full on dog person. Give me all of it. Get up in my face. I If you put me in a party and there's a bunch of people and there's a dog, I'm probably making friends with the dog before the people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
kind of how I am. I
I've
would rather be around dogs than people.
the yeah, I can imagine that's a very common sentiment for a lot of listeners out there. I've recently discovered that I'm very popular with border collies.
Ooh.
I've met two, and they both like adore me, and I'm not quite sure why specifically this breed of dog like me. But so far I'm two for two with border collies. Did you have a childhood dog growing up?
Yeah, we did. We had a dog, Sassy. She was like I want to say like a lab spaniel mix, if I remember correctly. And then we also had, cats and stuff. So I've always
Mm.
been kind of a big animal person, but the dog, she was more of an outside dog, more my dad's dog. But I mean, we've had a couple different dogs over the time. I remember when I was very young, we found a Chihuahua named Tippy that we named Tippy, and she could jump from the ground into my dad's arms. That was like one of the most memorable things about this Chihuahua. She would like jump into his arms. It
That's
was
so high
crazy.
for a dog. You
It
see,
is,
you see,
especially a small dog.
yeah, I've seen my cat leap from the ground to the top of about a 7 foot fence, but I've never seen a
Hmm.
dog do that before. So there's
Yeah.
a champion level Chihuahua. Um, I was going to say as well, we could get a little bit into sort of your growing up. Like you're from Denver, so a lot of my listeners are in New Zealand. So this is cool to have our first guest from the States on. Which where did you grow up?
So I live in the Denver area. I'm not from Denver, just to clarify that. Um, I grew up in South Dakota, which is the upper Midwest. I grew up in a small town in central South Dakota, Huron, South Dakota. It was about 20,000 people was the population. It was kind of a farming, manufacturing type
Mm,
industry type of area. The population has then now it's decreased actually. It saw kind of a recession. So there's only about 14,000 people that live there now. But
wow, that's quite a drop,
yeah,
isn't it?
it was quite a drop. Well, and a lot of it was because a lot of the economy was based on one particular business
Yeah.
that employed like 1,000 people, and then that of course feeds into the economy, and then it just shut down one day without notice, and then it kind of all went downhill from there.
I've noticed we just did a road trip down the South Island of New Zealand, and I remember driving past. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was a massive. I suspect it was a dairy, a milking, because we've got a big dairy industry here in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it and I thought, I wonder how much of the local area is basically only existing because of this behemoth of a structure, a factory. I'm not quite sure what it was, but it is quite shocking how quickly how quickly a town can just like almost disappear just based on the one, a car factory or something. I
Mm-hmm.
think that was
Yeah.
Detroit in the States, wasn't it? It was a big
Yeah,
car.
Detroit's a big, yeah, that's a good example of how dependent it is. And I mean, I think it still is pretty dependent on the car industry.
That's right. So we'll circle that back to dogs. I was going to say, did you grow up on a farm kind of
No, we
plot?
grew up in town, but like I said, it wasn't a very big town, but no, I
Mm,
never, I mean, there was a time it's funny you mentioned a dairy farm because my mom and my stepdad worked for a dairy farm
right on.
a little bit. So we did, lived on a farm, but most of my time, because my parents were divorced, I joke about it, but most of my time was spent between growing up in a trailer park and living in a shack down by the river.
Oh,
That's pretty
wow.
much.
That that is we always hear about the American trailer park stereotype here in New Zealand, but you're the first person I've met that actually was
I
in
lived
one.
it. I lived it.
You lived it.
I'm
Um,
pretty white trash. I'm pretty trailer trash through and through.
to be honest, I think I'm probably not far off the New Zealand equivalent to that. We were definitely middle class for most of my life, but we did have some some times where we might have been fairly close to that. So we'll move on to your second tiny joy. This is number two, the ice cold beer on a hot day.
Hmm.
I
I
think
mean, I can get down with an ice cold beer any day, but I don't know. When it's like 100 degrees outside and you're just out, doing yard work or whatever it is, and you need to quench that thirst, and you just crack open even just cracking the beer
the
open, just the
sound is
and when it
incredible.
the foam comes out of it just a little bit. Oh, it's so beautiful. And then you take that drink. Oh,
The have you always liked beer? Because
no.
I've never been able to really get the taste of it, but from looking at like just you describing it there and seeing commercials and seeing people do it, it looks like it's the most refreshing thing in the world, but I just cannot get into the taste of it.
So in my early 20s and my yeah, I was not a beer person. I had drank beer. I drank crappy beer, and that's probably why I didn't like beer. I would drink beer just back then just to get, you'd guzzle a couple of them and then the taste didn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
But what happened is I moved out. I lived in San Diego for a while and I got introduced to craft beer. And that's now I've acquired a taste for beer because of craft beer.
That's
So now I
interesting.
do like beer.
Do you have like a favorite, like if you had to picture your perfect day where you're cracking open a cold beer, what would be your
Just
ambrosia?
my regular beer is grain belt premium, which is basically a Minnesota Bud Light. That's how I describe it. It's a
Right.
beer that's brewed in Minnesota, but it's equivalent. It's a lager, light and crisp, very similar to a Bud Light. It's just not that their distribution is more the upper Midwest. So like anytime I go back to the Midwest, if I drive, a lot of times I stock up on it. Like I'll bring a couple cases home because I can't
Yeah.
get it in Colorado.
Yes. No, that's always a great experience. When you go, but like if I ever went back to Japan, I would have to probably bring a second suitcase for the certain bits and bobs that I would I'd be wanting to bring back that you just cannot get here in New Zealand. I was going to say as well, because you're a fairly design-minded individual as well, right? Is that fair to say? I
I'd say
think
that.
the craft beer space is fascinating to me because it has almost created its own style of graphics that you see on the
Oh,
cans. Like
absolutely.
there's some really cool um, beer labels. Like we have one here in New Zealand. I don't know if it's an international one, but it's called Panhead, and it's like it's all styled after like V8 engines and that kind of racing. I
And
don't know
I
what the
think part of that, because I come from a background in marketing.
yeah.
That's what I went to school for. That's what I do for a regular gig. I think part of it, the reason you see that, the design is because it is marketing, because now craft beer has become so popular. Like where I live, just in the town that I live in, this isn't even counting around. This is just the town I live in. There's like 9 or 10 breweries just in my town.
Yes,
I mean, so it's become such a saturated space that you really have to go. I feel like they have to go above and beyond on their graphics to get people's attention, to like
that's
stand out in the beer cooler.
that's a great point because Denver is very high elevation, I've heard.
Hmm.
So would you have a lot of these mountain breweries popping up in that kind of area?
Oh, probably. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, yeah.
I'm starting to think that we have a place called Queenstown, which might be the Denver of New Zealand because there are a lot
Well,
of
when I
independent
come visit
breweries.
next year,
We'll take you to Queenstown.
we're going to Queenstown.
And we'll take there's a famous bar with a mechanical bull that's kind of the
Ooh.
touristy thing to go to. So being being that you're from America, you might have an edge there in the rodeo space.
Being that you grew up in a trailer, you might have some.
You just completely obliterate like the high score record. Although rodeo
And
is,
that's just because I'm nerdy. It has nothing to do with growing up in a
yeah,
trailer park. It's just because I'm like, oh, a game, I have to win.
yeah, you see the score and you're like, yep, got it. I know what I
I
need
gotta
to
beat
do.
it.
So then number three on your list is long road trips. I feel like this kind of goes hand in hand with being in a band or a comedian, probably other types of
Oh,
entertainers too.
absolutely. Yep. And that for me, because I travel a lot. I typically don't like to fly. I mean, I will fly. I'm not like afraid of flying. Um, but I would rather drive because I
Mm,
really just like, for me, a long road trip, that's where and it's probably not safe at times because I'm up in my head a lot. It's where I work on material. I just daydream. I, throw on a podcast and don't listen to it. It's there for background. And I'm
yep.
just like, just driving, and my mind is just in a million places thinking about whatever it is I'm
Yeah.
thinking about. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, oh, I just pull back onto the road. No.
Wow, that's like it's like time travel almost.
It is. It
Um,
really is.
I remember watching the TV show Supernatural growing up, and that was a big thing there was that how the two brothers can drive pretty much everywhere in the States.
Mm-hmm.
I think with it, I don't remember why they didn't fly. I think something to do with demons, or there was some reason they didn't
That,
fly.
and I think because they wanted to drive their kick-ass car
Yeah, they
everywhere.
needed
I mean,
a
that's really
very true. I was going to say as well, there's nothing sweeter than when you know you've got a big drive coming up and a podcast you like releases a new episode and it's like a good hour and
mm-hmm.
40 minutes. That's
Yep.
definitely a tiny joy
Sometimes
of mine.
I'll bank it. I'll
Yeah.
know. I'm like, oh, I have a road trip coming up. I'm traveling somewhere for comedy. I'm not listening to my podcast on my normal routine. I'm going to wait for the road trip. So
Savor
I
it.
have them for that. Yep. Save them
Absolutely.
for that.
I've absolutely done that before. That's it. This is the thing that's fascinating about this show to me is I'm realizing how we all kind of do the same stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but we just don't really. You don't know until someone points it out. I was going to
Yep.
say as well with your number two. Can you remember a particular day that you had? Like, is there one memory that stands out over the rest of them of a
Oh,
particularly crisp beer that you had after a hard day?
no, I can't think of a
Understandable.
particular time. No, I really, yeah. There's not one that like stands out more than the
Every,
rest.
everyone is sweet. Yeah.
Anytime it's hot and there's a cold beer.
Yeah. So then with I was going to say with road trips, do you have a particular memory of maybe you shared a road trip with some other comics or I don't know, you just had a great time on the road trip. Is there anything that stands out as one of your favorite road trips?
Oh, absolutely. It was probably so I used to be kind of in a comedy troupe called the Distinguished Scoundrels,
Ah,
and there was three of us, and then there ended up being uh fourth after the tour, I guess. Anyway, the three of us, we were like we produced shows together, and then we put on a tour. And then we brought a fourth person who ended up kind of becoming part of the troupe to film it or whatever. We were like making a documentary,
that's
whatever,
cool.
big plans, all
Yeah.
those things. And we did this big tour where we went from San Diego out to Texas, and then from Texas up the Bible Belt to South Dakota. Then we circled around through Arizona and then back to San Diego. And we were out on the
Wow.
road for like, I don't know, like 2 weeks. And
Cool.
of the 2 weeks, I think we had like 10 shows or something like that. I don't
Awesome.
remember the
That's
exact.
great.
Yeah, and it was just a great time.
Yeah.
But through like 3 hours into the trip, we were at the state line. There was a checkpoint in Yuma, Arizona, and we almost got arrested because we had a bunch of edibles in the. So
So my
yeah.
my my follow-up question was going to be, do you have a particular road trip snack? I think everybody has their own particular snack, but I think maybe you answered that question for me.
No, for me, I'm not, because I'm not a weed guy. That was theirs. So
Oh yeah.
that was other people's on the trip, not mine.
Yeah.
My road snack, I like popcorn. I love what is it? Smart Pop or something, or
Yeah.
Smart Corn is the brand, I think, but it's just like the white cheddar. Uh
Oh,
that's probably my number one. or spicy nacho Doritos.
Is it those purple ones?
No, they're just nacho cheese, but spicy.
Oh,
They're more of a fiery red, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
And then it's more of I think it's more of an American brand, but they're called Salsitos.
Oh, it's a corn chip.
And it essentially, yeah, it's
Mm,
kind of like a round Dorito
yeah.
and like a salsa. It's so good.
Yes, I think we have an equivalent here. And the one thing I've noticed about those particular ones is they're a lot firmer than the typical Dorito. I feel like the Doritos fall to pieces
Yep.
quite easily. The you might laugh at this actually, but Doritos have been around for a long time in America, I
Mhm.
assume. So I can I can genuinely remember the way they drip fed the flavors of Doritos into New Zealand. So we started off with a brown flavor that was barbecue. And then I believe they introduced two different, it was like a yellow and a red one. They were both different types of cheese. And that was it for a long time. That was it for probably 10 years. Then they introduced those purple ones, which blew everyone's mind. And I think those are probably like the most popular
Yeah, those
ones.
are the chili, I think.
Yep, sweet Thai chili.
Sweet chili. Yep.
And then probably 3 years ago, we got Cool Ranch for the first time. Like we didn't have
Oh,
Cool
really?
Ranch up until very, very recently.
Wow, that's wild because Cool Ranch was
That's
kind of their
the,
signature. Like
yeah,
their
that was
signatures, their two flagships are just nacho cheese and Cool Ranch.
Cool Ranch.
Those were
Yeah.
the two main
Yeah.
ones for the longest time.
I think Kiwis probably don't quite get the scale of how ranch is in the States.
Oh my God.
It's a
It's
big
so
thing.
ugh. I'm not a big ranch. For me, ranch is only good on salad and for dipping vegetables.
Right,
Other than
right,
that,
yeah.
I get almost offended anytime somebody asks. Like I went to Applebee's today and met a friend for a happy hour, and
Uh-huh.
I got mozzarella sticks, and they're like, "Do you want ranch with your marinara?" And I'm like,
Wow.
"No, no, I don't want ranch with these. What do you get out of here? Get out of here with that."
That's that is an interesting combo. I also suspect the ranch you can get in New Zealand is different to the American ranch.
I'm sure.
It feels here like it's treated more of a salad dressing than as a dipping sauce.
Hmm.
There are some
Well,
restaurants.
as it should be, as it should be. It is a
Yeah,
salad dressing.
that's fair. Yeah, maybe we've got it right then. I know we have a Carl's Jr. here, and they do quite a good ranch dipping sauce for the tenders.
Yep.
But that's the only time I've really enjoyed it. The ranch Doritos didn't didn't really do it for me either. We're really getting into the weeds with these chips. We'll move on to the next one. I hope we're going to make it through all 10, but we'll see how we go. This is like I said, it's the pilot episode. So number 4, finding a new comic book shop.
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing when I'm out on the road for comedy. Anytime I go to a new town, one of the first things I do is I look up to see if there are any comic book shops nearby. And I try to make time to go visit them when I find them.
What are the series is that are you like a Marvel guy or are you like an Image
I'm more
Comics?
independent, so
Hmm.
I lot of Image. I a lot of Image comics, and then even smaller publishing companies, even smaller than Image, too.
Do you
But
do you have any like maybe like a top three just like series that you follow?
I mean, I'm kind of all over because the nice thing about independence is a lot of them are miniseries. They don't always do like a continuing
Yeah,
ongoing series. It'll be like 5 or 6 issues and then it's done. So they wrap up real nicely.
those are
But I
good.
do have
Yeah.
some favorite, like my favorite creative team is Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. They did the Criminal series. They did Fatale. They did Faded. They have a series called Reckless. They've got a new book that just came out in December. I still haven't read it. I have it. I just haven't read it, called Where the Body Was. They do
Oh wow.
a lot of true crime
Yes.
and
Yeah.
noir crime, which I'm a big crime person. So when it comes
Yeah.
to comics, I love reading crime comics,
Oh,
noir,
okay.
that kind of stuff. So
So you're
um,
less into superhero type stuff and more like I guess what they would describe as like graphic novels kind of thing.
but I'm more
Yeah.
like when it comes to like comics, I want more of a story that, superheroes are fine or whatever, but that's what's nice about independent comics is the storylines typically tend to be a lot. There's a little more
to it.
substance to them. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
My
So,
my favorite series for comics has probably been the Hellboy stuff. All of that I
mhm.
love. Was he Image or was that Dark Horse?
That was Dark Horse.
Dark Horse
And it's
Comics,
funny
yeah.
because we just talked about that. We just recorded a new episode of a new podcast that
There we
I
go.
have
Get the
coming
plug
out
in.
about, well, not trying
Where
to
can
do the
people find
plug-in,
it,
but
Dan?
they can find it wherever they listen to podcasts. It's called Panel Picks. Anyway, but the reason I mentioned that is because my co-host just finished reading a bunch of the Dark Horse or a bunch of the Hellboy stuff. He went and got, he's been getting the big
Yeah.
omnibus
Oh,
books,
I love
and he
those.
said he just finished volume 12 or something.
Fantastic. That is something about those books to me is just very satisfying. Something about the size of them and the paper they use and the way
Mm-hmm.
Mignola's artwork is on the page. Like, yeah, those are chicken soup for the soul, I believe the expression was that I heard the other day.
Absolutely. And that's how I feel about comic book, a
Yeah.
new comic book. I love going, like I said, when I travel, I always go. And if I'm in a bigger town and they have more than one, I'm trying to hit them all
Yeah.
or as many as I can. I'm like, I did that not too long ago. I had some shows down in Colorado Springs, which a couple hours from where I live, but I stayed there for the whole weekend. And I just planned my Saturday. I was like, okay, this shop is here. Then it's 10 minutes to this shop. And I just did a big circle till I got back to my hotel.
I love it. I've always been so jealous of the American comic book store experience because growing up here, we didn't typically, it wasn't really the done thing to have a comic book store. You would have maybe like a toy store that would also do comics and collectibles. So we'd always be watching these American TV shows like I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the Beetleborgs?
Trying to,
They were like a sort
it's,
of Power Rangers
it sounds familiar. It does
yeah,
sound familiar, but I can't quite.
they're 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 quite big here in New Zealand, and it was my favorite TV show when I was about 5 years old. And their local hangout, was a comic book store, and
Oh,
we
nice.
had nothing like that in New Zealand. I remember just watching that, being like, "Why don't we have this here? That's amazing." We also didn't really have arcades here in New Zealand. We had a chain called Time Zone, which was more about those games where you get tickets to exchange for prizes. You
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
really have
yeah,
the
yep,
fighting
yep.
games. Weirdly enough, if you wanted to go and play fighting games here in New Zealand, you would have to go to a fish and chip shop, and a lot of them would have like a Street Fighter 2 cabinet
Of
in
course they
the
would. Of
in the
course
fish and
you're going
chip
to get it
shop.
at a fish and chip shop.
Yeah, exactly. And so growing up, I always remember being so jealous of just it seemed like it was so easy to get comic books and that kind of whole. You'd see the
Well,
big
when I was
cardboard.
growing up, it really was because even when I was growing up, there were comic book shops. They weren't as as uh as there weren't as many as there are now, but you could
Oh,
get
really?
like comics. They sold them at like your local drugstore, like where
Wow.
like magazines. So it was
Yeah.
like where the magazine rack was. There was usually a rack for comics too. So you could just
Gotcha.
go to your local drugstore, get some comic books.
And they were cheap too. They were like a nickel or something, right? For
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, they were like a quarter or whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
That's I
I'm
guess it's
old, but I'm not that old.
yeah, true. That might have been more like silver and golden age prices. I just remember listening to a podcast about it was like Marvel and DC both kind of agreed to go up to 25 cents, and then one of them reneged and only went up to 20 cents. So you could now get five comics for $1,
hmm
whereas the other one you could only get four. So that just their sales skyrocketed because of that.
Oh man,
Um,
that's some sneaky stuff they got
I
there.
believe illegal too. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think the comic industry was very regulated back then. So
No,
it
I don't
was the
think it
Wild
is
West.
now either.
Good point. Good point. So number five on your list is a juicy burger and fries.
hmm
Is
I
that
love me a burger. Like I'm not a big meat person,
me
which
neither,
people
actually.
find that odd. But I know people find that interesting. I
They do.
love vegetables. I love, fruit. Um, I've never really been a big steak guy. Um, Not a big chicken guy, not a big fish guy. But when it comes to eating meat, if I get to choose, it's gonna be a delicious, juicy burger. I love, and especially like off the grill, a
Mm,
grilled burger with all the fixins.
hmm.
Oh,
What
making myself hungry thinking about it right now.
yeah, and I can only imagine the kind of stuff you can get over there. Um, I was gonna say, do you have a um, is there a particular chain that you like them from, or is there a restaurant that it would be if you could just click your fingers and it would appear? What would that be?
Oh, I mean, In-N-Out Burger is pretty good. Um,
I've heard the rumors.
and then also Culver's is really good.
Oh, I've
It's
not heard of
another
that one.
chain. It's like it's another chain here. I actually just had a Culver's burger. They do what they call butter burgers.
Oh yeah, I've
Um,
heard of those.
yeah, but anyway, yeah, I just had one last night. That's what I had for supper last night. But it was mostly because I wanted their fries. They have crinkle fries, and I love crinkle fries.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
but as far as like a chain goes, I don't know. I think probably In-N-Out would probably be the thinking about it because yeah, I mean there's a lot of places that have pretty good burgers. I was like
Yeah,
Burger King because they do the flame broiled
that
was
is
always
nice.
pretty
Yeah,
good
yeah.
because that's my thing. Like I want a grilled burger. I would
Mm,
rather grill burgers at home than go to a chain.
yes,
Like
yeah.
that's
I've heard that's a rite of passage for men as you get older, as you suddenly get really into grilling and smoking meats.
I
Has
mean,
that particular mania
oh
taken
yeah,
hold?
I love to grill. I've been trying to talk my partner into letting me get a smoker.
Ah,
Really want to get into this, go all in on meats.
yeah. I've heard the options are get really into World War II or begin smoking meats.
Yeah, well, and I'm going with meat.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a lot more productive. I'm already into World War II, so I don't know what's going to happen when I hit that age. Okay, so that I just got the thingy, the warning from Zoom that
Uh-oh.
we've got 10 minutes left and
All
we're only
right, we got to
halfway through the
speed through
list.
this.
Yeah, let's get through. So
We'll go.
number six, we bonded on this before, the post-show gas station snacks.
Yep. Now there's a
What's
trend here.
mm,
Obviously, you can tell I'm from America
mhm.
because I'm like my little joys, beer, burgers, gas
Comic
station
books.
foods.
What is your go-to gas station and your ideal post-show gas station snack?
Okay, so here, and I can't even get it where I'm at, but in where I'm from originally, there's a small franchise or a chain called Casey's,
Uh-huh.
and they have some of the best pizza. You wouldn't think that for a gas station, but it's really good. But yeah, give me a slice of Casey's pizza
Casey's
and
Pizza.
a Casey's coffee. Oh, I'm so there.
That sounds fantastic. There's something about it that kind of 1 in the morning, you stumble in and there's just like the night guy working and he's
Hmm.
playing his own music, like
Yep.
they can sort of do what they want at that hour.
Yeah.
And
I will say
yeah.
this at that hour, I'm not getting anything out of the like prepared food. I'm probably grabbing that popcorn.
Oh, yes, okay. So good point actually. Yeah, 1 in the morning, maybe stay away from the Casey's pizza. Um yeah,
After a
yeah.
certain time, I'm like, I'm not trusting this prepared food.
Yeah, because it's been sitting there for a while, isn't it?
I like the cashier's vibe, but I'm definitely not testing this food out.
You just look at his hands and they're kind of dirty, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, no, I'll give that a miss. So then I don't know if we can add anything else to that. Number seven, you like watching animals.
I do. I like watching hummingbirds. I love like when they're like on like a hummingbird feeder with a bunch of hummingbirds. It's like one of my favorite things to do. Like out in the mountains, like we go visit my partner's dad. He lives in southwestern Colorado, and he lives up in the mountains. And yeah, the hummingbirds come and hang out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Also, love watching animal videos. Just it
Like as
doesn't
in
matter.
just them kind of existing in the wild,
Well, not
or
just that, no, but like domesticated animals. I love watching dog videos, dogs doing silly things, cats doing silly things,
yeah,
being
yeah,
cute and adorable. I
yeah.
love it.
It is.
Sleeping. I love a good video of an animal sleeping. It's just so adorable.
Fair enough, fair enough. So then number eight, completing a task or housework. That's another relatable one, I think, for the people out
Hmm.
there. Um, do you have a particular like a routine when you kind of start with the easy
Hmm.
tasks to get yourself rolling? Do you have what is your kind of
Yeah, I
method?
mean, I really I like to clean the kitchen. I think, do some dishes, get the, put the load the dishwasher, wipe the counters down, get it kind of all reset. Uh and then and then just like straightening up, like I like organization. Like I'm kind of OCD. My partner gives me a lot of shit about this, but I'm very OCD. Like in
Mm.
my closet, like if she puts my clothes away, she's trained. I hate to say that way, but like she knows it's got to be a certain way.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
I can't have solid colors mixed with graphic t-shirts. My
Wow.
long sleeve shirts got to be together.
Yeah, yeah.
Even in my my dresser, I'm very like I got one drawer for shorts, one for pant. Like I'm
Mm.
very OCD about it. So
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. I
I like some
read
organization.
yeah, I read this subreddit called 2X chromosomes, which is just like a women's subreddit, and I just read it to see what's going on, see what kind of issues they're facing, everything, and the biggest one you see every week, there's like three or four threads on is like weaponized incompetence, as their partner's not tidying up the kitchen, putting plates on the thing or whatever.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
I think in this day and age, some people say flaw, but I think a lot of people would really appreciate having a partner that actually tidies up the house and all sorts of you read about all sorts of partners that you tell them to do you do one thing and then
They
that
freak out.
yeah, or it takes them much longer than it does for the
Oh
other
yeah,
person to
yeah,
do it, and so it's just easier to do it yourself. And so,
yeah,
yeah, I think the listeners will be going, yeah, good on you, Dan,
yeah.
being
Well, that's one of those
organized.
things I think because I've always been pretty goal oriented, and I like
Mm,
to, just complete it's like it's easier just to go, just get it done, just do it,
mm.
and then
It
it's done and
feels
out of the way.
it feels
And I've
refreshing,
always,
doesn't it?
yeah, and I've always been get it done so it's out of the way, so then you can go play. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good way to
that's
look at it.
kind of
Good
my
way to look at it.
philosophy.
Are there any chores that you loathe doing?
I mean, even though it's not that hard to do, I'm not a big fan of vacuuming, and I'm not a big fan of laundry. Even
Yeah,
though the machine does it, I don't know
laundry seems
why.
to be a big thing for people. I uh, it's funny because you do the laundry and then I have like a hamper and it kind of
Well, you
just
don't even
sits in the
do the
hamper.
laundry. The freaking wash machine does the
Yes.
laundry.
And then I think, but what I mean is putting the laundry away seems to be a big
Mm.
thing. People get stuck there, and
Yep,
I've genuinely considered buying another hamper just for the clean clothes, and then
that's
so I can
funny.
just take them out of the.
I'm like, once it's washed though and dried, I have to put it away. I can't. It goes into that OCD with like having my closet organized.
That's that
I gotta
sounds
be
like a
able to find my
useful,
stuff.
yeah. So then let's sort of combine the last. So we got a couple of minutes there. So number nine is a beard trim, and then number 10
That's
is a
right.
new hat and clothes. Do you visit a barber for your beard?
I do. That's something I started doing in the last year. I was trimming it myself for a long time because I was cheap. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to just start treating myself. I
Yeah,
don't have hair. I don't have to, like, I'm a bald person.
yeah,
So I don't have to worry about haircuts. So
that's
I'm like,
true.
you know
Yeah,
what? I'm going to treat the beard. And
yeah,
so I have started going to a barber, and there's just something so refreshing after
it does.
having it trimmed. They put in some beard stuff, they make it all look pretty, and just it feels so good. You
Because
just feel fresh.
that's the thing a lot of people might not realize is your beard. You actually have to like oil it and kind of you sort of wash, I guess to an extent, wash
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you
Well,
get
and the beard, like doing like the beard oils more for your face too. It's
yes, yeah, your skin gets
yeah,
dry. Yeah.
skin gap. Yep.
And then so last one, new hats. Are you an aficionado? How many hats would you say you have?
Like 50.
Oh wow. Are
Just
you a
looking in my room, and I moved them. I've got in my view.
Yeah.
I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 just in my view. And this
Fantastic.
isn't even where I keep all my hats. I
Wow.
keep them downstairs. I just bought a thing that holds like 30 hats, I think. So yeah, I probably have over
I
50
love it.
hats.
I love it.
Yeah. I
And
like a good
then
hat.
yeah, no, they're hard to find good ones here, but I do like a good snapback or something like that. Those are
Hmm.
great. So that's the list. We got about a minute a minute and a half left.
We did it.
Shall we do the announcement before we
Yeah.
run out of time?
Quick.
So Dan, you've just started a podcast label called Tape
Yep.
Deck Media. And
Correct.
I think we can officially announce we signed the contract about a week ago that Ruddle Me This is joining the Tape Deck Media empire.
That's right. They're gonna be part of the family,
I'm looking forward to
and
it.
we're gonna be making that transition throughout this week, and you're gonna be
Fantastic.
officially on the network.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's gonna be fantastic.
Yeah, no. So, folks, your feed might change slightly, but I will make a proper post with all the information in it. But yeah, so very exciting about that. It's kind of the dream, really. Big fan of Dan for many years now, and then when he announced he was starting a network, I inquired about it, and here we are today.
That's right, and looking forward to the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we run out of time, you're on social media as,
D Bub Comedy, and then Tape Deck Media.
and then you've got a new website, don't you? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's just dbubcomedy.com. It's my same website. I just bought a new URL.
Fantastic.
I'm all about branding. I wanted
Yes,
it all across the board.
I can appreciate that. Well, thank you for joining me, Dan. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to working together, man.
Thanks for having me.
And we are back. Wow, that definitely was what I would consider a successful pilot run of the 10 Tiny Joys format. Now, obviously, the pacing needs a little bit of work. I need to work on pacing myself through each question. We kind of ran out of time about halfway through and then ripped through the rest of them. But to be honest, what I think the conversation that we did have leading up to that was all really, really interesting and entertaining. And I hope you found it relatable. I hope it helped you remember a few of the smaller joys throughout life that you that maybe you forgot you enjoy, and you can go and you can go out and experience them again yourself. So like we said in the podcast, go and check out Dan on Facebook and Instagram, all that. I'll chuck his links down into the show notes below. Follow Tape Deck Media on Instagram and Facebook. I'll chuck that into the links as well. I imagine you'll be hearing a little bit more of Dan in the future, given that we're going to be working together with the Tape Deck Media podcast empire. I'm looking forward to meeting some of the other hosts, doing a little bit of crossover with some of the other shows. Maybe I'll be a guest on some of their shows, that kind of thing. Really, really looking forward to that. I'd like to talk a little bit about the format of the 10 Tiny Joys and just the inception of it, where the idea came from, in case that sort of thing is interesting to you. It's kind of no secret that since I've been doing the whole Ruddle Me This podcast project, I've been looking for what I've been calling a game of the podcast, and I'll explain what I mean by that. There are certain podcasts that are, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but they have a game to them. That's the only way I can think of to explain it. A great example is the Are You Garbage podcast. If you're not familiar with that podcast, I highly recommend you go and check it out. It is absolutely hilarious, and their format is fantastic. So the format of that show, the two hosts, H. Foley and Kippy, they ask the guest a series of questions, and then based on whether the answer is yes or no, they determine whether the guest is classy or garbage. So some of the questions can be anything like, did you have a above ground swimming pool? Did you have a second fridge in the garage that was only used to keep beer? That kind of thing. And I think the real genius in a podcast format is that it gives you a loose structure to follow, a skeleton, if you will, and then it is just up to the guest and the host kind of improvising the content. And Are You Garbage is a fantastic vehicle for that, because my guests are often they're a little bit nervous that their 10 Tiny Joys are not like funny or interesting, but I think to me the 10 Tiny Joys are more like a diving board that we launch off of, and it's more about where the conversation ends up versus, the actual 10 Tiny Joys being this hilarious, gut-busting situation. Another great podcast with a game is the Blocks podcast. I'm very heavily... I'm not... It's okay. If I tell you that I'm inspired by it, it doesn't count as ripping it off. The Blocks podcast by Neil Brennan is a phenomenal podcast. The blocks, the titular blocks, if you will, are all the things in Neil's life that he feels make him isolated or feel like he doesn't belong, that kind of stuff. He did a special on Netflix called Blocks. Fantastic special. Highly recommend you go and watch that and then go and listen to the podcast, because the podcast is essentially just he brings the guest on, they bring their list of blocks, and then again, it's about where the conversation goes based on these blocks. There are all sorts of other podcasts that inspired me, like Jim Jeffries' podcast, I Don't Know About That, is another good example of a podcast with a game. Jim has set himself up beautifully there to simply turn up and perform, essentially. And the gist of I Don't Know About That is they get an expert on a topic, and then Jim has to basically, with full confidence, he has to explain everything he knows about this topic, and then the guest will correct him. And again, very, very simple premise, but it just allows Jim to improvise and be loose with it and see where it goes. And you often find that you'll learn more about your guests by getting them to talk about things that they're passionate about versus the standard questions of like, where did you grow up? What's your writing process like? Etc., etc. And genuinely, the impetus of the idea of 10 Tiny Joys is I was sitting in a McDonald's drive-thru and I was just waiting in between. I think I'd placed my order and I was waiting to drive up to the second window to pay for it. And I was just shocked at, it's as dumb as this sounds, I was shocked at how happy this experience made me, which, if you're familiar with me, you're aware that I have weight issues, and I'm sure this lends itself to some kind of psychological damage in that I'm associating McDonald's with happiness. So don't worry, that's definitely not lost on me. But the idea stuck in my head. I thought it's really interesting to think about, rather than, like I said at the start, less about holding my son for the first time and more about like playing a PlayStation game for the first time, kind of small joys like that. And I thought, I've never seen anybody do a podcast like that before. I did heaps of Googling to make sure nobody else had kind of done a similar format. And to my surprise, no one's jumped on it. So that's when I started thinking about names, the alliteration, 10 Tiny Joys. To be honest, it's probably more efficient to do 5 Tiny Joys, given that it was about 5 we got through in the 40 minutes that the Zoom 40-minute limit. But I think alliteration and branding counts for a lot, so we're going to keep it as 10 Tiny Joys. Like George Carlin said, 10 is a psychologically satisfying number. I suppose it also gives me a little bit of room if the interview, if some of them are duds, we can gloss over them a little bit versus certain ones, which will give us a lot of meat on the bone to talk about, as it were. So anyway, that's basically it. I just thought I would give a little bit of an update, tell you about the idea, where the idea came from. I hope you enjoyed it, because I really enjoy having these conversations with people. You can catch one in person on the 13th of February in Little Andromeda here in Christchurch, the day before Valentine's Day. We are doing a live version of 10 Tiny Joys with 2 very good friends of mine, Matt Lilly and Georgia West Cahill, 2 stand-up comedians from Christchurch. They also have a podcast that I understand is on hiatus at the moment, but it's called Playtime with Georgia and Matthew. They've each submitted me their list of 10 Tiny Joys, and they understood the assignment too. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the weeds of that with them. Just visit the Little Andromeda website to get your tickets for that. They are $10. So anyway, that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you look forward to hearing more of these kind of conversations. I'm really enjoying the format. Follow me on Facebook, social media, etc. at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. I'll talk to you again next Monday. Thank you very much for listening. Really, really appreciate you. Ruddler out. Thank you so much for listening to 10 Tiny Joys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you came away from it with a newfound appreciation for some of the little things in life. Have a fantastic rest of the week, whatever that looks like to you, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you again very soon. We'll see you next time.